Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another season episode moment of Geeks and Barbells, where we have book talk. We geek out on the books that have entered into my life because I feel like it. I just got done reading the first novel in the Dresden Files series, and I wanted to chit chat, discuss, debate, talk about stuff. Running out of different ways to say that. So, let's talk about Dresden. Let's talk about him. Jim Butcher's creation, his masterpiece, or so people say. Now, I want to start this off with I have listened to other people talk about Mr. Dresden, and I hear quite consistently that you really need to push through this series. You need to get to book 9, book 10, book 11, where you've seen the world really build up, that this novel kind of starts off small and becomes somewhat of an epic fantasy. So I'm keeping that in mind when I am talking about it. But to start things off where we're at in the first book, this is very much a kind of darkish modern fantasy, and it does it pretty well in I suppose a realistic way compared to a lot of other modern fantasies, where you see how people would react if magical creatures, if vampires and all sorts of baddies actually exist in the world, and that's with denial, which is a really interesting take because most of the modern fantasy genre, they either everyone's completely blissfully unaware of the existence and it's kind of a secretive society kind of thing, and the complete other extreme where everybody knows about it, it's a fucking shit show. In the Dresden Files, people know magic exists, they know things like vampires exist, but most people, because these creatures are so rare and because people like sorcerers, just like Mr. Dresden, they're so rare that most people just never see it in their life. They push it aside, they don't deal with it, because I suppose it would be a very difficult thing to have to deal with, to know that there's these things that could kill you so easily and there's things you can't explain to understand. It's kind of a normal human response. It's kind of refreshing to see it in a series. And seeing how Dresden has to deal with that fact. I mean, within the series, he's the only, as far as the story says at this point, the only sorcerer who is professionally available within the United States. I don't know if in other countries, maybe it's the whole world. So he has an actual office where he proclaims that he is a sorcerer for hire. And most people don't believe it. They think it's kind of a joke. Even the police who he teams up with, the task force who are responsible for dealing with events and crimes that they cannot explain by normal means, they come to him for help. Even those people have difficulty believing that this stuff even exists. And so he has to constantly deal with this kind of ridicule and disbelief. And so that's a really, I think that's probably one of the most fascinating parts of the series, is him, not being recognized as this magical being. You don't even really see him interact much with anyone else in the magical community except for his warden, his watcher, which I won't spoil that because it's not necessarily in the video, but you barely see him interact with other magical people. He's mostly interacting with normal humans. Even those of who've seen magic happen still kind of don't know how to deal with him. So that's pretty cool. The rules, the regulation system to how magic works. I mean, you see how Dresden, when he's prepared, when he's ready, he can do some pretty cool magic. He can show off his strength in a way. But in many other cases, he is woefully weak. Because magic has so many factors that go into it in this series that he's not overpowered in the slightest, except in certain moments. And even then, especially within the first book, he does not get shown in the slightest as like some overpowered freak. He has maybe 2 moments where he manages to do some stuff, but mostly it's by the thinnest line that he survives. And that, at the same time, is probably my biggest problem with this book, because even though there's a good amount of depth, Dresden as a character kind of gets off with things that don't make sense. There are multiple instances within the book where he pretty much gets attacked and almost dies, and doesn't die simply because the person attacking him chooses not to finish him off, which is kind of ridiculous. He could have just been dead, and that would have been the end of it. But for book convenience, they don't kill him. So I found that kind of ridiculous in many instances. Also, Dresden's character, he could have, by simply explaining things a bit more to his allies, been able to accomplish things much more quickly and in much less danger to himself. But he has this sort of white knight persona going on, even though he's very rough and very not good at communicating or even protecting people. But he tries to be like this good person who's keeping people safe. But in reality, all he ends up doing is putting them in more danger because he doesn't freaking explain stuff. And he even acknowledges this in the book, but then continues to keep doing it. So, for example, his relationship with the female police officer who he's works alongside with, multiple times he could have explained things to her better, explained things that would have put her in the loop, but he comes up with this logic reasoning that she's not allowed to know this, or it's better if she doesn't know that, this is safe. And all that ends up happening is she's still put in danger. She still doesn't understand stuff. She doesn't get to help him in the slightest, so he's constantly stuck, almost dies multiple times because of it. It's just pure idiocy. I'd like to say that's the kind of thing you would see in a young person in their 20s, but I can't recall right now, but I'm pretty sure Dresden's like in his 30s, mid 30s or something like that. It's not the kind of decision making I would expect from someone who is that age, much less someone who, when you see little flashbacks of his past, someone who's been through some stuff already, he's not inexperienced. So he's just very stubborn and does not play well with others. That's the most positive way I can put it. And because of that, it causes more issues than it should. Now, will this shift and develop as the series go by? Will it get better at that? I don't know. We will see. But for now, that's probably my biggest con of this book, is that as a character, Dresden is just pretty annoying. He just doesn't do things well. And the justification for them is very weak. And frankly, he should have died multiple times and just didn't, just because the author didn't want to kill him, obviously, because he's trying to make a series. So it kind of just made me annoyed at the scenes where he did get attacked and just magically happened to survive. And I don't mean magically as though he used magic. There was no magical reason. It's just the person just didn't kill him. So I would have to say, though, having heard from people that the series will progress into something more deeper, more developed as it goes, I can see how that could happen. Jim Butcher does a really good job of setting up his character and the world, and giving just enough lore and backdrop that you're like, oh, I wonder what that is, but then not explaining anything. So you really want to progress and really find out more about, let's say, the White Council, who are the sorcerers who supposedly watch over all these sorcerers and make sure they follow the rules and regulations. It'll be curious to find out more about Dresden's past, even though you only see a little bit about what happened between him and his master and how that went wrong. It'll be curious to see his own abilities develop. Like, where else will he be able to take them? Because you see him use his magic, but as I said, in this world, there's so many things that have to happen first before power can be used. So what will happen as he becomes more experienced, more developed, as he's pushed more? I think that'll definitely be something to look forward to in the future novels. But overall, I think Dresden's character, even though he is so frustrating in his stubbornness, that's the biggest draw. If you want to follow along with someone who is so obviously strong but imperfect, tries to do good but screws up a lot, Dresden is really relatable. So the things that frustrated me about him and frustrated me about the book that I consider a con in terms of that might annoy people actually drew me in even more, because if you can push yourself past that, you really realize that he's just very human. He's someone who's had messed up things happen to him, doesn't know how to work well with others after, tries to be a good person, but doesn't know how, and is so used to like relying only on himself that he does not know how to go to others properly. Um, so I'm super curious to see how that will progress in the series. I'm very, very curious to see how the magical world develops as well, because you only get a small glimpse. Like, you're told about the Neverwhere, which is supposedly where all the fae and the magical creatures kind of stay, but it's not really explained. Is it a separate reality? Is it just a land that's been blocked off from other places? It's not fully developed or worked on, so that'd be really cool to get to know. Um, you only see really like one demon and one vampire. So what is their society like? How do they interact? How is that all put together in the world? I'd really love to see that. What other kind of magical creatures are there? So there's a lot more to explore, and Butcher does a really good job of just giving you just a teaser of everything, making you interested, and then holding back and just punching you in the face with character development, and just fully focusing on how Dresden's getting his ass whooped. It's a really fast-paced book. It only happens over the course of a couple of days, and Dresden is just like constantly getting battered left, right, and center. So it really brings you along really quick, gives you those good little teasers, and so I think this is a good setup for a first book. I'm not sure when Jim Butcher wrote this novel. I think it was quite a long time ago, so I can just imagine how much more developed he's become as an author as the series progresses. They're at book 14 now, book 15. So that'll be really cool to see not only Dresden's development, but Jim Butcher's development as an author. I am a huge fan of his Codex Alera series, which is pure fantasy. Phenomenal series, which I will do a video on also at some point. I have, you'll see he's right there. That's the 6th book, the Codex Alera. So great series. So I would definitely recommend reading the Dresden Files. I know some people don't like the TV series, which only lasted for a season, but if you kind of are someone who likes to see a visual representation, the series was definitely very, very different from the first book, but it's kind of fun. I like the actor who plays Dresden in the TV series. He also played in Arrow, so it's pretty fun if you want to check it out, but definitely don't expect amazing things. The book is much, much better. Keep this short. Read the second book, come back to you, develop my thoughts more on it. But I would definitely check out the Dresden Files book one. Book one. It's really hot in this room because I live in Canada. It's freezing cold outside, so I put on the heater and I'm dying. I miss being in a hot place. I was in Asia for a year. Now I'm in the cold. The cold. Desperation. Yeah. Like, subscribe, comment, check out the podcast, check out the other videos, talk to me, let us converse within this quarantine moment. Have fun, everybody, and stay geeky, stay healthy, stay alive, because everyone's crazy these days. Love you all.